What is up, everybody? Back with another video, bro. And today we're gonna be reacting. So we're the Miami Heat actually bubble frauds all along by Hoop Reference. You know what I'm saying? We just reacted to one of his videos.
The last year or so in sports has been pretty crazy to say the least, and almost nothing about it was conventional. Because of the
Bro, hold on.
crazy to say the least, and almost
Bro,
nothing
Jimmy,
about
bro, I don't know who telling you to, bro. Cut the facial hair, bro. You literally look homeless, bro. Just cut the facial hair. Then you need a haircut in this, bro. I don't know if it's just you don't got a haircut or something. Cause this is back during quarantine, you know. Oh,
it
my
was
bad. It's back during quarantine, bro. You know, people didn't have haircuts, but like, bro, this is bad, bro. This is bad. You
conventional.
looking like Katie with hair right now, bro. Not
Because
gonna
of
lie.
the circumstances professional sports leagues had to carry on without any fans in the stadium for quite a long time, which undoubtedly takes away a lot of what makes the experience of professional sports so great. Players thrive off the crowd. Added pressure gets put on the teams when many people are in the crowd watching, and it just makes the atmosphere as enjoyable as it is. Without fans, arguments can be made that the games become glorified scrimmages in many ways, and this was especially the case in the NBA playoffs last year when they entered the bubble to undergo the finale of the season. In the bubble, we saw tons of crazy impressive performances, we saw tons of drama, we saw upsets, and a lot of players played at a level way above what we've typically seen from them. Arguably, no team overachieved in there more than the Miami Heat did, who made it all the way to the NBA Finals as a 5 seed. But now, a year later, things aren't quite going as well for them, which brings us to the topic of today's video. The Miami Heat just got swept in the first round by the Milwaukee Bucks in a series that at no point after Game 1 looked even remotely close. So today, we'll be discussing what went wrong for them this year, how they got to this point, mistakes made along the way, and whether or not it's reasonable to say that their run last year was a fluke. Before we start though, it turns out about 62% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel. So please, if you enjoyed the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. Last year, the Heat went into the playoffs as the 5 seed in the Eastern Conference, so by no means were they viewed as the favorite to make it to the finals. They had a pretty up and down regular season, but admittedly they did start to really click at the end of the year, playing their best basketball at the perfect time. We have to remember that when Jimmy Butler first went to Miami in the free agency of 2019, there were a lot of people questioning the move. His priority was clearly on winning, and the Heat were an incredibly young, inexperienced team that hadn't really accomplished all that much prior to his arrival. Youth and inexperience is typically a recipe for disaster in the postseason, but obviously, when the team made it all the way to the finals last year, Jimmy's decision became completely justified and all question marks vanished. However, this year we just saw a lot of the reasons why those question marks were there in the first place come back about, and I'll get into everything regarding why I think this is. Typically, the biggest reason young players struggle in the playoffs while the veteran stars tend to have the most success is because the atmosphere of playoff games truly does get taken up a notch. The hostile playoff environments are definitely a whole new level of intensity in the game of basketball, and it can shake you if you're not ready for the moment. The bubble last year, however, obviously had no fans in the crowd, so the playoffs became no different than any other game of basketball, and thus the young players last year felt much more comfortable than we've really ever seen. We saw young rising stars like Donovan Mitchell, Jamal Murray, and plenty of others play absolutely out of their minds in the bubble, and especially with the Heat, who, as I mentioned before, were a fairly young team, definitely benefited from this. Players like Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, and Tyler Hero are big parts of their lineup, and all three played some of the best basketball of their careers in this bubble. This isn't a coincidence either. If you think it is, all you have to do is take a look at their production in last year's playoffs with no fans, versus their production in this year's playoffs with fans in the stadiums. Now, the most obvious counter-argument to these claims is that every team in the bubble was playing under the same circumstances. It wasn't just the Heat benefiting from it, and they're absolutely right. The bubble wasn't something that just catered to the Heat by any means, and on top of that, they weren't just a team full of young guys playing out of their minds either. Of course, Jimmy Butler is an established veteran star player, and they also had guys like Andre Iguodala bringing championship pedigree, giving everything he had left in the tank defensively,
okay.
Jay Crowder providing toughness on the perimeter and spacing the floor with his shooting, and Goran Dragic played some of the best basketball of his career as a 12-year veteran last year. They had a very strong combination of youth and experience, and it all came together for them at the right time. Their mistake, however, came in the off-season afterward when they basically chose to run things back with the same core, declining to make any big moves to continue to build on their success when almost every other team in the East around them was doing exactly that. The 76ers overhauled their front office and built a very formidable supporting cast to get the most out of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. The Bucks aggressively acquired Jrue Holiday, and the Nets, at the time, knew they had Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant both returning to action the next season. Meanwhile, the biggest splash the Heat made was when they signed Avery Bradley, who isn't even with the team anymore, while they allowed key players like Jay Crowder and Derrick Jones Jr. to leave in free agency. They trusted their core to be good enough to continue to contend instead of looking to improve.
Yeah, that's how you messed up,
that
bro.
was the
As soon as y'all seen the Nets making all them trades and the Sixers, that's, bro, you should have knew right then, bro.
Start of their downfall. This was never more evident than when James Harden became available for trade and the Heat became linked with potentially acquiring him. Almost inexplicably, the organization and their fans seemed to be in agreement that Harden wouldn't fit the quote-unquote Heat culture, and that in a package, it wouldn't even be worth it to offer Tyler Hero. The whole idea of Heat culture amongst the fans has not only become seemingly pompous to most, but it's
Jimmy, bro, you gotta do better, bro. This is not it, bro. It's like, bro, do something, bro. This is not it.
So in that moment that I realized that it's also pretty delusional at times if that's how they're thinking. Now in hindsight, we can look at James Harden dominating with the Brooklyn Nets where he actually did go to, and he literally just had a game against the Celtics in the playoffs where he individually scored more points in that one game than Tyler Hero had in the entirety of the Heat's playoff series against the Bucks this year. Now, the Tyler Hero thing with Harden and the trade has already been beaten to a pulp by most, so I won't go on too long about it, because there were other warning signs that this year's version of the Heat just weren't on the same level as last year's team, regardless of if there was a bubble or not. Last season, the Heat had the 7th ranked offense and the 12th ranked defense in the regular season, so even before the playoffs and the bubble started, they were pretty formidable on the season as a whole on both ends of the floor. This year, however, the Heat ranked 18th offensively and 10th defensively, showing that their offense was far less effective and their defense, that hadn't really changed much from last year to this year, was not good enough to overcome that drop-off. Goran Dragic experienced a drop-off individually this year offensively, Jimmy Butler wasn't able to flip that switch that he flipped last year, and Tyler Hero was not close to the level of player that he was hyped up to be. So, were they bubble frauds, as everyone will likely be referring to them now as? That still feels a bit harsh.
Yeah,
as I said before, they were playing under the same circumstances as everyone else last year, and you can't take...
Bro, for y'all to go from being in the finals to getting swept in the first round, not even winning one game in the first round, bro. Come on now, bro.
Take that away from them. In reality, though, based on how professional basketball is typically played with a playoff atmosphere and the current makeup of their team, I think this season did more so show that they're still another piece away from actually being legitimate contenders when things are back to normal. Jimmy Butler probably isn't an elite first scoring option for a championship team because of his struggles to shoot from the perimeter and his tendency to play a bit passive, and their young guys aren't quite as as ready as they showed in the bubble last year. They're still a very good team, so don't get that twisted. The results of this season are just much more of a realistic representation of where they currently stand. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the Miami Heat moving forward. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
Hey, bro, that's gonna be the end of this video, bro. Like, comment, subscribe, and we out.